Evet, değerli arkadaşlar, Bahçeşehir Üniversitesi Hükümet ve Liderlik Okulu tarafından düzenlenen Siyaset Okulu programına hoş geldiniz. Bu yayınımızda, birazdan başlayacağımız yayınımızda Washington'a gidiyoruz. Hudson Enstitüsü'nün Asya ve Hindistan direktörü Doktor Aparna Pande ile birlikte olacağız. Kendisi çok değerli bir akademisyen, çok değerli bir analist. Biraz Asya'yı, birazcık Sivas'a da bizden selamlar. Asya'yı ve Hindistan'ı konuşacağız bu süreçte, hem ekonomik hem siyasi olarak. Ama duyurularımızı yapalım akşamı kapatmadan önce. Sonra vakit olmuyor bazen zamandan dolayı. Yarın saat 5'te 23 Nisan'a özel önemli bir webinarımız var. Enstitüler olarak, Bahçeşehir Üniversitesi enstitüleri olarak. Yarın siyaset okulu bir günlüğüne ara veriyoruz. Yok. Dolayısıyla webinara sizleri bekleriz saat 5'te. Onun haricinde sabah yine arzu edenlerle kitap seansımızı yapmayı planlıyoruz. Saat yine 11'de olur, 12'de olur. Zaten görürsünüz yaptığımızda. Vaziyetimiz odur. Online staj başvuruları da aynı şekilde devam halinde. Hepinize tekrar güzel bir bayram diliyorum. Hem de bu seferki hepsinden daha farklı, daha anlamlı, hem yılı itibariyle, ama bir de onun ötesinde ben şahsen çok da fazla bugün çocukların okullarından kaynaklı işte temsil babında şarkılarını, sözlerini, şiirlerini dinledim. Yani normal bir zamandan daha çok duygulanıyor insan. Çünkü hepimiz böyle heyecanlı bir şekilde evlerde de olsak yürekleri birleştirmiş durumdayız. Allah daha nice yüzyıllar nasip etsin. Göremeyeceğiz bundan sonrakileri tabii ki, ama bir şekilde daha güçlü olarak devam edecek. Ne mutlu bu ülkenin vatandaşı olana, ne mutlu bu ülkenin topraklarına doğana, ne mutlu bu bayrağın altında, bu vatanın altında, bu topraklarda hayatını geçirenlere, ne mutlu Türk'üm diyene, ne mutlu bu ülkenin mirasını bugün bizlere bırakanlardan mirası aldığımıza, başta Ulu Önder Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, bütün silah arkadaşlarına, hepsine çok şükranlarımızı sunarız. Hepsinden Allah razı olsun. Ne mutlu Türk'üm diyene diyorum. Keyifle diyorum, gururla diyorum, mutlulukla diyorum ve çok değerli hocamızı davet ediyorum birazdan. Hi doctor, how are you?
How are you doing, Dean? Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure and honor for us to host you in our School of Politics program in Bahçeşehir University. Welcome. You're in Washington, right?
Yes, absolutely. So it's afternoon my time.
Excellent. Now, first, I already introduced you in Turkish, but I would like to do so in English too shortly.
Okay.
Hudson Institute is one of the institutes that we come and visit when we are in Washington. So
Wonderful.
now we are so honored and pleased to host Dr. Aparna Panda, who has been dealing with Asian and India program for a while. And today, actually, with your help, in the upcoming 40 minutes, and
Okay.
some parts of Asia, which we didn't touch bases with yet. So, if it's okay for you, without taking too much of your time,
No,
your time is so valuable, and we have a diamond 40 minutes with you. So I want to use each minute so carefully. First, I would like to start with this. Now, we have been talking about China. We have been talking about United States, European Union, Russia, and even Middle East and some countries, Latin America. Even we touch bases with Africa. But there's a giant in the middle of Asia with the population, with the culture, with several religions, with democracy, with different kind of beliefs in a good harmony. But in the middle of a big chaos. Now, what is the chaos? Obviously, COVID, as we all now, the pandemic.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, also there have been crises going on in the region, the tensions between United States and China, also Russia and the other parts of the region. So pretty much, can you tell us, especially the pandemic process, from the perspective and point of view of India first, then I will start moving to the economic cases.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much, Dean. It's a pleasure to be here. So, what India, and as of now, the Indian government's policy is to try and basically shut down or lock down the country. India does not have the healthcare infrastructure to do large scale testing, tracing, and isolating. So as of this morning, India has tested only about 400,000 people out of its 1.4 billion people. And we have around 20,000 cases, confirmed cases.
20,000.
However, 20,000, yes. However, the entire country is in what we call lockdown. And lockdown basically means that, you cannot leave your house except if you have to sort of literally go just across the road to pick up groceries. But you can't leave your house. The police is out on the streets. And the government may extend that lockdown even for the rest of May. And
March?
the reason...
You said March?
March 23rd.
23rd till April 3rd?
No, May 3rd.
May 3rd.
May 3rd. And they may extend it further. And the reason is, the government's belief is it cannot handle too many tests and too many patients. So self-quarantine and forced quarantine of as much of the population as possible to reduce the likelihood of spreading any community spread, people getting it from somebody else. And by the time May comes or June comes, the government will be able to have more tests. And if there are cases, because the cases will come even after June, then the government will have some capacity to deal with it. That is what they have done up till now in India.
So, now, the analyst who can look the situation objectively. Now, do you find Indian government, which, because we are not talking about a country has 5 million population, 10 million population like some European countries. We are talking about billion. So now, when you look at the all diverse and a giant country, land-wise, population-wise, do you find the government's action had been enough, or early, or late? How would you criticize, in a good or a bad way, the Indian government's precautions about the situation?
So I think that, there's one which is the federal government response, right? And then there's the state response. So I will look at both quickly.
Please.
Federal government, I think, responded a little later than we would have liked. But they India's main problem and the federal government's primary problem is healthcare infrastructure is not as good as it should be. We are not like countries in Southeast Asia, Taiwan or South Korea or even Singapore with a very good healthcare infrastructure. India has not invested enough. India spends only 1.3% of its GDP on health, which is very low. So the government did not have the option of saying that, we will be able to handle all these cases. And so they could have responded, I would say, maybe early March, but they pushed it and kept waiting, and they finally had no option but to do it. However, saying that, I do believe that they had no other option but to lock down, because it isn't possible with 1.4 billion people to do testing of hundreds of thousands of people. The Indian capacity for healthcare cannot take it. Coming to states, there are some states who have done a better job and started a bit earlier. And among those are states which, like Kerala, India's southernmost state. It has a large population which works abroad. It had cases of Ebola and SARS in previous years, so they have built a testing, contact tracing ability. So some of the states have been able to do a better job, and their curve has started to flatten. Other states, the curve is still rising.
That's something. Okay, now we know, even though the GDP, actually not the GDP, overall growth of the country is huge, and we always consider as one of the BRIC countries, like India is going to play such a tremendous political, economy, and world social existence, right?
Yeah.
But the real question is this: do you believe this situation, the population, health, um, the gap between them, is going to affect the economic attention to India, the political attention to India, the social attention to India? Do you think the health safety, the health process, and this pandemic is going to affect the economy in a bad way?
Yes, it is. And Dean, the main reason is that till 2 years ago, India was growing at 7%, which was very high, and India was one of the fastest growing economies. The start of this year, before the pandemic hit India, the economic growth had come down to about 4.5%.
What months we are talking about?
January. So I'm
January.
saying, December, January, before it
Yeah.
actually, the impact. Now, according to the IMF, India will still grow at 1.9% this year. If that happens, it is good considering the pandemic's impact, but it is bad considering the fact that India and provide money for healthcare, provide money for other situations. The second part of this is the Indian government's economic stimulus is only $22 million, which is 0.8% of India's GDP. Countries like the US are spending 10% of GDP to bolster the economy. India doesn't have that much of money. The government doesn't have that much of money to be able to spend that much of GDP. Now, you know well. Sorry.
Just to remember it right, when we are talking, United States is putting 10% of the GDP to boost the economy, a stimulus package. You are talking about India 2.2, you said, right?
No, 0.8. 0.8%.
0.8%.
Yeah.
Ooh. But
Yeah.
it's the
But
federal
$22
government,
million.
correct?
$22 million.
You are talking about billion dollars.
Million.
Just 22 million?
Yeah, just 22 million.
Ooh.
Yeah.
All good.
So it doesn't have, because the last few years the economy has slowed down, so it doesn't have that much of money. It will need to spend more. And as you know well, a large part of India's economy is in United States, Europe. Their remittances will slow down right now, right? There's less remittance coming in from outside. There's a disruption of the unorganized sector. Migrant labor is returning home. So the Indian economy will have to deal with a lot of shocks, which will cause a further slowing down. And if the government is able to sort of, re-energize unorganized sector, give them jobs to do, construction work, and other, then they can slowly rebuild the economy, because remittances from abroad, from every part of the world, will suffer for every country, including India.
So, what is the escape plan, do you think, for this? Because first of all, let's be honest about something, including United States. I don't see any country in the world who is in good shape. Okay?
No,
Like
nobody's
nobody
in good
is in
shape.
good shape. I have been interviewing with distinguished ministers, professors, or CEOs from Europe. They don't feel good too. Like nobody is
Nobody feels
we,
good.
we are in good shape. Nobody. Actually, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask you about the rest of the Asia too. But
Sure.
let's stick on India first. Now, when we focus on this situation, everybody is planning with the stimulus packages and everything to boost the economy, including Turkey, including us. But the numbers you give, 0.8%, 22 million, is definitely not going to be enough, which we
No.
already know. The gap between the rich and poor in India
Yes.
was already so high, and a mass
Yeah.
of people who are unemployed is already on the
Yeah.
streets. We all
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
Now, the question is this. Question number one. How do you see a possible escape plan from this situation if things end around June? Hopefully.
Yeah.
I think the effect is going to last even longer in
Yes, it
India
is.
in
It
the
is. It is. It
circumstances.
is.
This is the first question. What should be done in order to prevent this, according to the economy of the government, according to the economy of the individuals, and the situation in the region? That's my first question. And the
Okay.
second question, let's come back to our political analysis more than economy. Do you think this economic turbulent times might affect some political changes, but I'm not only talking about the government change, something like that. I'm talking about major shifts in the dynamics of India.
So the economic one first. I think
Yeah.
the government's plan is threefold. One, even if the government doesn't have enough, has not put in enough money right now, what they are planning is that on the first, India has an advantage over many countries. India has a majority of India's population is under more young people. So India believes it's more likely to sort of cause some form of herd immunity, that the younger population will not fall ill that likely, or fall sort of, there are fewer people who are going to need actual hospitalization and hospital care. Second, most of these people, so India has had for number of years now, there's a government program in which the government would provide work for 100 days of the year to anybody who needs it. And that would be agricultural labor, construction, working in sort of in government, just the working class, industries and factories. And that's what they have been providing in earlier years. The program did quite well, and I believe they want to bring it back and maybe increase it from 100 days to 150, 200 days so as to provide. So basically, the government is giving you some form of, either a basic income or giving you direct cash transfers into your account. The government has, in the last few years, done a lot of digitization. So they've tried. India also has the world's largest, biometric identity. So everybody sort of, they've got your biometric data. If you have a cell phone, you have a bank account, they can actually do direct cash transfer to you. I don't know how far it will work out, but I believe they do. And finally, India has vast food reserves. So the question of starvation will not arise as long as the Indian government actually moves the food from the warehouses to individuals. And this year, again, India will have a bumper harvest of agriculture. So food starvation will not be a problem as long as they can actually provide it to the people. So I think that's what they're trying to do. Provide some jobs, direct cash transfer, provide food, and then hope that when the economy restarts, because a lot of it is going to be unorganized, there's going to be, the jump start to the economy will come from there. Coming to your political question, I mean, as of now, sort of, I don't see any major shifts in the bigger picture of India, and the reason is the Prime Minister remains popular. Everything he's doing, he's seen as a strong man, and that he will deliver even in a crisis like this. What has happened is that a number of state governments, those who are performing, they've managed to build their profile, and those state chief ministers and state leaders, have done a lot more, and so there's a possibility that India will move slowly towards a position, a stage where you'll have a wider number of local leaders who are rising up and playing a role, something which we have not seen in the last 5 to 6 years. But I don't know, there is no national level political party aside from the BJP. Most other parties which have some support are state or provincial level parties.
Now I'm checking out the numbers also in one site here. I'm gonna ask that to you in a couple of minutes, but before
Sure.
that, we all know in the circumstances, a lot of work power in Silicon Valley, especially in IT businesses, not only in United States, not only in Silicon Valley, but also in Europe. In certain parts of the world are from India. The young Indian students who get education, even in India or the other parts of the world, is actually number one in the world about the IT issues, which we are proud of them. But the real question is, you mentioned at the very beginning to that, they are bringing money back to India. They are also supporting their families. Now, it shows me two big problems. One of them is, as you said, the float of the money back to India is going to be cut. That's a risk. But more than that, do you think, because of this pandemic, two reasons, accepting people from other countries, especially with President Trump's
Yes.
current green cards issue,
Yeah.
the new students, the new people, not students, the new employees from other countries like India will be less compared with, the past years, obviously. And the second, how do you think, in that sense, how it is going to affect Indian um, new generation who has been dealing with tech issues, which, by the way, the Indian youth is leading on this in the world?
I actually agree with you, Dean, and I worry there for all three reasons. One is the purely economic factor. Till last year, India was the country with the largest remittances, around 70 billion, billion with a B, dollars were provided to India's GDP by by people in the Gulf and United States, Europe, and other parts of the world. It's not going to be the same this year, or is going to be. If you recall, in the last few years, there has been a rise in anti-immigration, anti-asylum seekers, anti-refugees all over the world. Everybody is closing borders. Even India has been trying to close its borders with its neighbors. But it's been happening all over. I believe that the pandemic is only going to make it worse. While countries may accept students who bring in money, and they hope that they go back, but they are not going to be as open to workers coming in. And so I do believe that even in the IT sector, technology may actually, on the one hand, improve, and so it'll be easier for you to work from home. So you can technically employ somebody in Turkey or in India or in China, and the person doesn't actually come to Europe or doesn't actually come to the US. But I believe that immigration will have a problem and there will be a negative side. The third side, most of the students, international students, have had to leave US universities and go back home. So they've lost about 2 months or 3 months of studies. They will not be back in summer. And some universities are thinking of, work from home even in fall. So international students who pay a lot of money primarily to come to that country, will they be that willing to give the dollars if they have to stay at home in Delhi? Then they might as well sort of study at a local university. Why should they put in that $50,000 a year if they are not going to be able to go to that university? So I do believe there will be an impact on on sort of high-tech labor, just regular labor, as well as students, and economic. I mean, I think we have to wait and see, because right now they are saying it's going to be for a year or two that we have to deal with something like this, till we have a vaccine or an antiviral drug.
Now, I finally find the numbers.
Okay.
Help my eyes. By the way, I'm using the Worldometers numbers by
Okay.
considering it's right. Okay. Now, India, it says total cases
Yeah,
20,500.
20,000. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, wait. Total losses,
About 700.
actually, total tests,
Yeah, 400,000. Yeah,
462.
400,000. Yeah.
Now, of course, we are talking about 20,471 people according to the test, right?
Yes.
Now, the real question is this. Obviously, this number is a lot more higher. The real question is even more than this. Do you trust the actual numbers that you have in your hands about India? That's question one.
Okay.
Two, lockdown. I don't know if it was early, it was late, whatever. But what is the health solution that the government is preparing itself? Because obviously, I'm talking for every single country. We are talking about numbers which is higher than what we see in our hands, because it's all up to uh, the numbers that belong to the test, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you are talking about over a billion population. Yeah, it's financially in any way impossible to test all the people.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not talking economy, but what is the health solution for India?
Okay. Okay. So first, I do trust the numbers to the extent that they have sort of, that I would of any country. I do. Is the organization doing it? But the abysmally low numbers are because the government, as I mentioned, the government's policy is that right now, if we say everybody can test and everybody should get tested, then we cannot handle it. Our system will not be able to, we don't have that many tests to test everybody who will come. So the health solution is phase it out. Right now, keep people at home. In 4 to 6 weeks, those who have it will recover from it if it is mild. If it is really bad, they will go to the hospital. If there is community spread, in 4 to 6 weeks, that community spread will also, because of forced quarantine, come down. And only the really bad cases will end up going to the hospital. That gives the Indian hospital capacity some time to get more tests from China or other parts of the world, or develop their own tests, so that when people in that sort of after 4 to 6 weeks, as people come in, the hospitals can actually manage the number of people coming in and manage sort of those hospital beds, the ventilators required, the tests required. Finally, the government and most Indian epidemiologists do believe that sort of a younger population means that it is less likely that India will have higher deaths. It will have lower deaths, because the younger population will over time build herd immunity of some sort.
Got you.
So that is what they hope is, try and push it to when we can actually deal with it, and deal with it when slower numbers come in. Right now, quarantine everybody.
One of my students asked a question. I am afraid to bring the question in front of you because when I do, but I'll try it. When I do that, it's sometimes hard to take it
Oh, okay.
away.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Can India replace China in particular sectors?
Now help me. Okay, I did it.
Yes, you did.
Sometimes it sticks over there and it doesn't go away. Okay,
So,
but I want to add a couple things on this question.
Sure.
Now we talk about in okay, the health system might be a little problematic because of the investments. The economy might be not in good shape, but at least India didn't lose trust by the international international community.
No.
But unfortunately, China
Yeah.
lost it a lot.
Yes,
Now,
it did.
the question is, just from this perspective, do you think, as my friend, as my student asked, some of the production or anything economically might also create an advantage for India? Possible shifts, if there is, what kind of sectors to India from China?
So I think it does create, and the reason why I would say that is, if you recall, Japan, the Japanese government is going to pay its companies to move out of China. So there are going to be a number of Japanese companies moving out. Similarly, a number of American companies have in the last few years wanted to move out of China. India has been opening up its foreign direct investment and actually offering to build some what you call the special economic zones, where companies can come in, they'll be given some tax incentives. So primarily, India would like to attract manufacturing. And the reason is that India has a large labor force. So from India's point of view, manufacturing which employs more labor is better. So India is interested in attracting companies which will come in and set up factories and employ Indian labor, and then export those products. So whether it is textile, whether it is cars, whether it is any form of manufacturing. So India is looking to that and is hoping and trying to create incentives. It is also trying to prevent Chinese companies from taking advantage right now. So just last week, the Indian government issued a clarification on foreign direct investment. They said that any company from a neighboring country, sort of which tries to invest in manufacturing, we will keep a sort of close eye. Now, obviously, they don't mean Nepal or Bhutan or Bangladesh, they mean China. So I think India is trying to do that. The trust part, I'll come back to, Dean, and that is, so many of the test kits that China has sent are faulty, as you and I know. So Nepal has a problem with the test kits. Bangladesh did, Sri Lanka did, Maldives did, even India did. India, however, sent in equipment and actually set up quarantine shelters for many of these countries. So it's those countries at a time when Chinese actions are causing pain to those countries.
Now, we had been talking about China, India, but also there's other actors in the region. Definitely, the population is uncomparable with China and India, but actually Indonesia still
Yeah,
not
it's
China.
big.
And,
Yeah.
but this is a huge one, maybe number 3, right? Around
Yeah.
the area. How about the others? Like the other Asian countries, which is also your expertise.
So I would say, if you look at South Asia, the country after India, which has the largest number of cases, but population-wise, a larger percentage. So India's population is 1.4 billion, right? And we have about 20,000 cases. Pakistan's population is 200 million. They have 10,000 cases.
How many tests?
Testing they haven't released. So their cases are about 10,000, just half of India's. And there the problem was because they kept the border open with Iran and with China for a very long period of time. So they did not really quarantine or shut down or have a lockdown for quite a long period of time. So they have a large number of cases. The other countries, they don't have that many cases. I mean, Bangladesh has around 4,000, Afghanistan about slightly over than 1,000. Sri Lanka, Maldives, Nepal, Bhutan have smaller numbers. The Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, of them, Singapore did the best initially because they tried to ensure a semi lockdown of sorts.
Yeah.
But that did not work. When they opened up, the number of cases have shot back again.
You said Singapore, right?
Singapore's cases have gone up now.
Now it says Singapore is 10,000. It's almost same as Pakistan.
Yeah.
But the thing is, let me do my best to see. But you know what? Interestingly, 94,000, almost 95,000 tests in
Yes.
Singapore.
So Singapore is
120,000 tests in Pakistan.
Yep. So Singapore has done a very good job. But you see, Singapore invested in healthcare. They have a very good healthcare system. They have testing, tracing, isolating, which is good, like Taiwan and South Korea. Their numbers have gone up in recent days. But of all the Southeast Asian countries, they have still done the best. Many of the others, like Indonesia, actually did not shut their borders till quite late. And part of that, or Cambodia actually sort of, pretended there's nothing happening for a long time. And that's because they wanted to keep China on their side. And so the Cambodian prime minister refused to stop flights, refused to stop entry of any sort of, close the borders, pretended there are almost no cases for quite a long period of time. Indonesia also, they depend on Chinese tourists for many of their hotspots. So the shutting down of borders took a lot longer. However, some of these Southeast Asian countries have invested in healthcare, so they do have good testing and contact tracing. Because of SARS, if you recall, the Southeast Asian.
They get used to it.
So they have done a better job on the testing and tracing, even if they have numbers. Because sort of numbers don't itself tell you anything. It's more how much you have tested, traced, and can you isolate people or not.
Now, we are getting in our last 5-6 minutes, but I want to ask also. There's a lot to ask, but I'm gonna go back to United States with your permission.
Okay, sure.
Now, there's a serious Indian population.
4 million.
4 million, right? And the citizens you are talking about, able to vote?
Yes, I'm with the 4 million. I'm not. So this does not include the students or green card holders. Or only
So 4
Indian
million
Americans.
voters. American government expert. And that's the weirdest election in U.S. history in a lot of ways. Now, yesterday, a journalist asked me a question like, Hocam, how do you project the upcoming election? I said, I have no idea because first, in order to project the election, you have to see the convention. I was together with a friend who was in defense industry in United States, 2 lectures before you. Is there going to be conventions? Is there going to be a celebration of the primaries or the caucuses? Is there going to be a summer campaign time? Which is
we don't know.
We have no idea.
No, we have no idea.
Is Bernie is going to go out and support, real support I'm talking about?
Real support.
Biden, I have no idea.
Yes.
If they're going to even survive that long.
Yes.
You know? So it's a critical times in the United States.
It is.
But I'm asking the question to you about the immigrants.
Okay.
Not specifically from Indian side, but overall. But when I mean immigrants, I'm not talking about like 50 years, 100 years ago immigrants. I'm talking about the newly ones. For instance, yourself, how many years you have been in the United States?
So I am not a citizen. I'm still an Indian citizen. I'm a green card holder.
But the people around you?
So
10 years, 15 years.
15 years. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about 10 to 15 year range. How people are looking at the current situation? Do you think compared with the last election? That's my comparison.
Yeah.
More people, the immigrants, will go out and vote for or against President Trump, or not vote.
Okay, so I have more data on the Indian immigrants than I have on other communities by sort of. So from what I know, more of them will go out to vote this time, and more of them plan to go out and vote Democrat. About 86% of Indian Americans have voted Democrat over the years, and that number has only increased in the last few years, primarily because sort of even those who sort of, in 2016, he did receive some Indian American votes. He did in some parts of the country. But I think many of those people actually thought that they were voting for somebody who was different, and sort of the anti-immigrant rhetoric was for elections and not for policy. Sort of for many of them, there's been disappointment that the rhetoric was not just for politics; it was also for policy. The second part is there has been a rise in anti-immigrant, sort of rhetoric, or just, when you meet people face to face. I experienced that soon after the elections. I was in the metro and I was talking to a friend of mine in Hindi. And I noticed people were looking at me, and I thought, never in my years in DC has anybody ever looked at me when I'm speaking a foreign language, because it's DC. But I did experience that, and I have friends who experienced worse than that when they were in the suburbs and in other parts of the country. So there has been a rise. And so I do believe more people will go out to vote. Finally, the pandemic has caused, and, economic disruption, sort of just at the end of the day, if nothing else, one expects the government to do more and to take care of us in any country.
Even though this was the last question, I'm gonna add one small one because we still have 2 minutes, so I can use my time wisely. I don't want to lose you before the time is done. Now, this is the question. Because of the pandemic, right? A lot of people felt more lonely, more into their shell in a lot of ways. Now, I had been seeing and talking with academicians from New York, like yourself, in front of my students. Now, when you look at the DC, obviously the situation is not that risky compared with New York.
Yes,
but still,
yes.
do you think people like the stimulus package or any kind of action President Trump will or might take at the moment and consider it enough to fight with the pandemic?
No.
This is an important question from my
not
side.
yet. Not
because
yet.
I think it is going to affect the election a lot.
Yes, it is not, because sort of, the amount of money which has gone in is a lot, but a lot more is needed because the disruption it has caused. Just give you examples. Like, I live in a neighborhood where there are a number of small restaurants, a pizza shop or an Indian restaurant or a Thai restaurant. Those people have not even been able to apply for the loan, and the money has been spent up. So, the grocery sort of, so it's, I do believe that the government may think it is giving enough, but there's not enough. Most people do not believe there's enough money which is going around. There are too many people who have been hit by this economy, and primarily because it's not just manufacturing. The US is a service protection and need payroll protection, which the stimulus package is not going to be enough for.
Doctor, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dean. It was wonderful.